Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Olson, welcome. In America, we shouldn't need to say that parents speaking out about their children's education aren't domestic terrorists, or that those raising concerns about the radical direction the left is trying to take this country are not domestic terrorists, or that Trump supporters aren't domestic terrorists, but apparently we do, because the Biden administration is bound and determined to demonize anyone and everyone not in lockstep with their far-left agenda. Last September, the Biden White House colluded with the National School Boards Association to orchestrate a letter to President Biden that portrayed concerned parents speaking out at school board meetings as security threats. The letter urged the president to use the Patriot Act to go after America's moms and dads. Just 5 days later, the Attorney General issued a memorandum directing the FBI and U.S. Attorney's offices to address a, quote, disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence at school board meetings. And if you remember, when we had the Attorney General in front of this committee, we asked him about where did they learn about this harassment, this disturbing spike in intimidation? Where did they learn about it? And his response was, from the school board letter that they helped coordinate and put together to send to the White House. The press release that accompanied that memorandum said that Mr. Olson's division, the National Security Division, would be involved in a department-wide effort to target parents. That's right. The division that is supposed to be prosecuting terrorists, protecting us from terrorists, the kind that want to hijack planes and bring down buildings, decided that a priority of this division of the FBI is parents at school board meetings. And oh, guess what? We find out that this whole situation was coordinated. That's right. Like I said earlier, the NSBA letter was a pretext for the memorandum. The letter was instigated by the White House. Documents released by the National School Boards Association show that the White House knew that the letter would urge the administration to invoke the Patriot Act, and the White House raised no objections. In fact, the National School Boards Association admitted that President Biden telephoned the then NSBA president to say that he was appreciative of the letter. When this all came to light and America's parents rightly became outraged, the National School Board Association apologized for its action. The NSBA wrote to its members, quote, "We regret and apologize for the letter." That's a lot more than the Attorney General or the Biden administration has done, because as far as we know, the memorandum is still in place. That's right, as far as we know, the Attorney General's directive to the National Security Division to target moms and dads remains in place. And if this was it, if it was just a political stunt, that would be bad enough. But it's actually much worse. Because of whistleblowers who came forward, we know that the FBI created a threat tag specifically targeting parents, a designation specifically targeting moms and dads. And we know that the FBI opened over 24 investigations into parents merely because they stood up to speak on behalf of their children. We sent countless letters to the DOJ trying to get answers, but have gotten virtually nothing back in response. I'm sure we will have some pointed questions for Mr. Olson today, and I hope that he is prepared to give us answers on the answers our constituents deserve. We also hope he is prepared to talk about the Department of Justice's refusal to address people trying to intimidate Supreme Court justices at their homes and their children's schools. And we have great concerns about the terrorist attacks targeting pro-life facilities and groups around the country. This year, there have been dozens of attacks on these facilities, but the Biden administration seems preoccupied with other politically charged investigations. We'd also like to know why the DOJ is ignoring all the facts coming to light regarding the business dealings and illegal activities of Hunter Biden. In fact, a troubling pattern has come to light recently that indicates the Biden Justice Department seems more focused on politics than it is on fighting crime. And don't forget, this is the division of the Department of Justice that we entrust with immense surveillance powers. The chairman mentioned his reference to FISA. Within the National Security Division is the Office of Intelligence. This office is responsible for preparing and filing all applications pursuant to FISA, as well as appearing before the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. Of course, we all know about the FISA abuses over the past several years and how the Department of Justice and the FBI misused FISA to target the campaign of President Trump. Mr. Olson has been entrusted with a great deal of responsibility. It's our hope that today he's come prepared to answer a great deal of questions this committee has about the Department of Justice. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record. I will now introduce today's witness. Matthew Olson is the Assistant Attorney General for National Security. In that capacity, he leads the Department of Justice's mission to combat terrorism, espionage, cybercrime, and other threats to the national security. From 2011 to 2014, Mr. Olson served as the Director of the National Counterterrorism Center. Prior to leading NCTC, he was the General Counsel for the National Security Agency. For 18 years, Mr. Olson worked at the Department of Justice as a career attorney and in a number of leadership positions, including as an Associate Deputy Attorney General for National Security and Special Counselor to the Attorney General. In 2006, he helped establish the National Security Division and served as the first career Deputy Assistant Attorney General for National Security. Mr. Olson began his public service career as a trial attorney in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice and later held positions as a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia and special counsel to the Director of the FBI, supporting the post-9/11 transformation of the FBI. Previously, Mr. Olson clerked for Judge Norma Holloway Johnson in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. He graduated from Harvard Law School and the University of Virginia. We welcome our distinguished witness. We thank him for participating today. I will begin by swearing you in. I ask that you rise and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief? So help you God.
I do.
Let the record show that the witness has answered in the affirmative. Thank you, and please be seated. Please note that your written statement will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, I ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes. To help you stay within that time, there is a timing light on your table. When the light switches from green to yellow, you have a minute to conclude your testimony. When the light turns red, it signals your 5 minutes have expired. Mr. Olson, you may begin.
Thank you, Chairman Nadler, Ranking Member Jordan, members of the committee. I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here today to testify about the important work of the Justice Department on national security. As you know, as you noted, Chairman, Congress created the National Security Division in 2006. The goal was to unify and prioritize DOJ's national security efforts. The National Security Division has a wide range of responsibilities. You've touched on them. We prosecute terrorists and spies. We protect the nation against cyber attacks. We enforce export controls and sanctions laws. We provide legal and policy support to intelligence operations and oversight. And we review foreign investments in U.S. companies for national security risks. This morning, I would like to focus my opening statement on one of our top priorities, and that's counterterrorism. The country faces a persistent and dynamic threat from terrorism. This threat encompasses both foreign terrorist groups that seek to carry out attacks against the United States, as well as domestic violent extremists who are often mobilized to violence by racism and anti-government ideologies. International terrorism poses a continuing and evolving threat to the U.S., both at home and abroad. We keep an unwavering focus on violent jihadist groups, and we play an integral role in the broader all-of-government effort to defend against these threats. At the same time, the Department of Justice is committed to tackling the alarming threat at home from domestic violent extremism. Domestic violent extremists are individuals in the United States who seek to commit violent criminal acts in furtherance of domestic, social, or political goals. For example, we have seen a growing threat from those who are motivated by racism. We also see an increase in threats from extremists who espouse anti-government or anti-authority ideologies, and who often target those who participate in civil life, such as elected officials, police officers, and healthcare workers. There is no doubt that these threats are on the rise. The number of FBI investigations over the past 2 years has more than doubled of domestic violent extremists. The January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol stands apart. The department's investigation is the single largest domestic terrorism investigation in the nation's history. To date, that investigation has led to the arrest of more than 860 individuals. Many of these defendants have been charged with very serious crimes. They include seditious conspiracy, obstruction of Congress, and assaults on police officers. We are committed to holding accountable those who engaged in violence and other illegal acts, and to bringing to justice anyone who unlawfully tried to overturn the election. We are upholding our oath to defend the Constitution against those who tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. Our national security mission requires that we protect these fundamental pillars of our democracy. We work to protect not just our democratic institutions, but also our citizens and communities from the terrible costs inflicted by terrorism and violent extremism. The tragedies in Buffalo and Pittsburgh, El Paso, Charlottesville, and elsewhere are seared in our memories. We must be clear that law enforcement faces very stark challenges when it comes to domestic extremism. Violent extremists are too often able to radicalize online quickly, easily acquire military-grade weapons, and they target vulnerable locations, such as public gatherings, places of worship, and shopping centers. These are places that are very difficult to defend. The National Security Division plays a critical role in countering these threats. We lead and support terrorism investigations and prosecutions, working with our partners at the FBI and with U.S. attorneys' offices around the country. We recently established, as you noted, a dedicated domestic terrorism unit. The goal is to oversee and coordinate these cases across the department and around the country. Our domestic terrorism unit works very closely with the Civil Rights Division in the Department of Justice, which has prosecuted some of the most heinous terrorist attacks in recent years using our federal hate crime statutes. Having spent 18 years myself as a career Department of Justice attorney and prosecutor, I know that our workforce is committed to the Constitution and to ensuring equal and impartial justice. We prosecute cases based on the facts and the law, without regard to ideology and politics. Our national strength comes from our founding values. These include the rule of law, freedom of speech, and freedom of association. And we will uphold these values as we safeguard the American people from threats to our safety and to our national security.
Biển chiều hôm đã trao anh dạt dào bao kỷ niệm, như vầng trăng sáng to giữa khơi xa, như hàng dương gió reo suốt bốn mùa. Em yêu anh như yêu bờ cát trắng, lòng lo âu khi mùa bão qua đây. Em yêu anh như yêu câu vĩ dặm, dần thì giận mà thương cũng thật nhiều. Ngoài khơi xa đang có gì đợi anh, lúc phong ba biển động sóng gầm gào. Em chờ anh thức trọn suốt canh thâu, như dòng sông lúc với rồi lại đây. Anh yêu ơi thương anh nhiều lắm đó, đừng đi xa như loài cá lang thang. Em yêu anh, em thương anh vất vàng, dần thì giận mà thương cũng thật nhiều, dần thì giận mà thương lại càng thương. Tình yêu em như sóng biển chiều hôm đã trao anh dạt dào bao kỷ niệm, vầng trăng sáng to giữa khơi xa, như hàng dương gió reo suốt bốn mùa. Em yêu anh như yêu bờ cát trắng, lòng lo âu khi mùa bão qua đây. Em yêu anh như yêu câu vĩ dặm, dần đi dần mà thương cũng thật nhiều. Ngoài khơi xa đang có gì đợi anh, lúc phong ba biển động sóng gầm gào. Em chờ anh thức trọn suốt canh thâu, như dòng sông lúc với rồi là ai đây. Anh yêu ơi thương anh nhiều lắm đó, đừng đi xa như loài cá lang thang. Em yêu anh, em thương anh vất vả, dần thì dần mà thương cũng thật nhiều, dần thì dần mà thương lại càng